There is a difference between being liked and being valued. A lot of men will like you, a lot of women will like you, not many will value you. Be valued. That is the ultimate goal. Welcome to the chat with Selassie. I am Selassie, and thank you for stopping by to watch today's episode. This is a community that we keep growing, and we are just here to inspire one another, learn and unlearn. So if this channel resonates with you, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and also hit the notification bell so that you don't miss out on anything we post. All I want to say is I appreciate you for watching this episode. Hi, Kayre.
Hi, Celeste.
Thank you for staying through. I know that the first part was a lot to say, to even feel, to relive, and to just, it was heavy, it was heavy. Even for me, who was just listening, it was a lot. And again, I said it in the first episode in part 1 that I really do admire you. I admired you already, but I have come to admire you more. Just by hearing like the story from you, I have come to admire you more. So I think what we're going to continue today, we are going to continue from when you got married. You and Dave got married at the Vineyard Church. And I remember that in part 1, you did say that it was you, your bridal party, his parent, your parent. Because it was during the COVID season and you guys got married. And you had also said in part 1 that after the proposal or before then, when the cancer came back, when it got worse, he kept getting weaker and weaker and weaker. On the day of your wedding, what was his strength level like? Could he walk by himself? Did he need assistance? Like, what was his strength like on that day?
Yes, that was actually really interesting because he had continued to get weaker, and I told my parents and his parents, so they kind of knew what to expect when they got there. But then they came, and my parents got there on Friday and got married on the Saturday. And Friday, he just all of a sudden he was doing so much better, and he was walking around by himself and all of that, because during the week it had gotten to the point where I actually asked the pastor, I'm like, I don't know if we're even going to be able to make it to the church. Like, would you marry us in the living room? And he said, of course. Because I didn't even know if I could get Dave in the car and get to the front of the church or anything. But it's just all of a sudden was doing better, and they were saying it's because he was excited about the wedding. But he was still definitely tired, and we had chairs set up at the front of the church, so we could sit during the ceremony as opposed to standing most people do in their weddings. And we initially were thinking he would just, we would help him to the seat, and maybe he'd just be sitting there and I would walk in. But he wanted to, process in like people typically do. And so I, asked his best man, I'm like, well, walk down with him, make sure he's okay. But he didn't need any help.
Wow. So he walked like every other groom would do.
Yeah.
And stood until you came?
He did.
Wow.
And then my dad walked me down the aisle. I was really glad that my parents were there, because when we were planning the wedding initially, thinking, okay, we're going to do something over Zoom, no one was going to be there. But my parents flew up because they knew that he didn't have long left, and they wanted to see him and to be with me and us and all of that. So they were there for the wedding, and Dad walked me down the aisle, and we both, sat down for the service. And, the pastor was great. He was like, I've got stuff planned out, but if I can see that it's too much, I'll cut it short and all of that. But so it wasn't a long service, but a lot of people don't have long services anymore for ceremonies.
Yeah, no.
But he did pretty good. And then a friend of mine from work is a photographer, and I was like, I know this is really short notice. Like, can you photograph our wedding? And he insisted on doing it for free.
Wow.
And so pictures are amazing. But I also told him, like, after the wedding, of course, you like to take pictures outside and with the bridal party and the bride and groom and all that. And I said, I don't know how Dave's going to be, like, if he's going to have energy for pictures. And he did. And so it was a perfect day. You never know in Atlanta what March is going to be like. It could be 80 degrees or it could be 50. But we got some pictures outside, and he hung in there for a while. After a while, he was like, all right, I need to go inside and sit down. But we got some great pictures, and, got back to the house, and he kind of had to crash for the rest of the day because he was exhausted, but we were able to celebrate. And,
did you go back home with like your family and the bridal party? Did you guys have like a reception, or did you skip that?
No, we knew that he would not be well enough for a reception. We did get a cake. It wasn't a wedding cake. It was just like a chocolate cake.
Yeah.
We both like chocolate cake. And we, did the feeding each other the cake thing. But then after that, everyone just kind of went home.
Yeah. Wow. So now you're married, and you did say that he had to create space for you, and you guys, before he even wanted to, sell the house anyways, and when you guys knew you were going to get married, you both decided, okay, we're going to buy a new house, and then start afresh in the new house together. But looking at how things have turned out, and Dave's health and everything, you did not want to spend those few months you had packing and unpacking and stuff like that. So you kept your apartment, like you said, and then you got some few clothes there. So how did you do, because I know women, we have a lot of things, we come with a lot of things. Would you take some few things there and then maybe come back for some more if you need more? Or how was it if you did not move everything there? Were you just repeating and keeping the clothes you had, or how was that like for you?
Yeah, I didn't get a lot of stuff. I just brought enough that I needed. I really didn't go back and forth. My apartment kind of became the land that time forgot. Like, it just kind of sat there with all my stuff, and I was like, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to be here with Dave. So, whatever clothes I had, I just washed them and, did laundry and just stayed there. I moved in when he got really sick at the beginning of March, and the oncologist told us we only had a couple months left.
So you moved in before you got married? Is that what it is? Or
like
after?
a week before.
Oh, a week. Oh, okay. And even if you moved in before you got married, that is your choice. There's really no...
I was just wanted to be there with him.
Yeah. Which is most important. Yeah. You guys are married, newly wedded, and you only have a couple of months or a limited amount of time with Dave. How was life after marriage? I'm guessing there was nothing like a honeymoon.
Yeah, it was hard in some sense that we didn't get to do like a normal wedding and have all the stuff that everyone gets to do, and have the big party, and have we didn't have a reception. We didn't have all our friends there to celebrate with us. We didn't get to go on a honeymoon, but the important thing was that we were together.
Yes.
And so I kind of feel like things didn't change, other than I was there all the time.
It continued.
But yeah, we still spent time together, and I still supported him, and it was just a continuation, I guess, of our relationship.
So the dynamics of your relationship did not change?
I don't feel like it did. Not in the sense of because we got married, but as he continued to get worse, I was his primary caregiver, so that became a lot more, because before he was living independently, and he would need help with some stuff, and I would have to drive him when he got too sick to drive and stuff like that. But mostly he could, he could do everything by himself. But it kind of, there became a point where it wasn't safe for him to go up and down the stairs by himself, and then, at all. And so he definitely needed help with certain things, and he went back to needing his cane again, to walk, and then just even walking with his cane, like balance was too much of an issue, then he would need someone to help him, like while he had the cane. And so I would say the dynamic just changed in terms of my role as a caregiver. But I feel like my role as his wife and loving him and supporting him and being there with him, like, didn't change from what it always had been.
I know that with Dave, he did not go back to work. Did you go back to work, or after you spoke to your boss and your boss told you he's gonna, figure it out, and MFLA and all of those things, did you go back to work, or?
Yes. Well, what happened was I couldn't take FMLA because we weren't married, and it's family medical leave, and like they didn't care. Not that my boss didn't care, but the company, HR or whatever. They couldn't grant me that until we got married, so I had to take vacation time, and then once we were actually married, then I could apply for FMLA, which I think is 3 months. So 3 months where it was unpaid leave, but where I would have leave and the company would be obligated to keep my position for me, because I had a medical event with a family person before I went back. And I assumed by 3 months, that Dave would be long gone, just based on the prognosis. But 3 months later, he was still with us. So
how did that make you feel? Because oncologist told you he just has a couple of months or whatever, and then you took FMLA, is that what it's called? And you're like, okay, after 3 months it's gonna be sad, but then I'm gonna go back to work and all of that. Were you happy but disappointed at the same time, or how did that make you feel when he was still here?
No, I definitely wasn't disappointed. Like,
okay.
you always want that person to still be there. And
yes.
And at the time, I mean, obviously it wasn't fun for him, and he was, weak and all of that, but he wasn't in pain. So we started hospice, like end of April, because after we had that scan at the beginning of March, and then college is like, there's not much we can do. They said we could start, like, put him in hospice care at this point, or we could, try a different chemo. And we said, like, let's try something else. And I don't think they expected it to, cure him or anything, but the hope was it would at least stop the progression.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't get worse. But basically, the state it was at right then, even if it didn't get worse, it was bad enough to cause serious harm, and could kill him just how it was then in March. But we kept trying. We tried some other things, when he had strength enough to. But then at the end,
did you try the chemo? Or?
We did.
Okay.
And then at the end of April, he had another scan, and they didn't even show that one to us because usually they review it with us. But apparently it was even worse. And I mean, honestly, I think the oncologist was surprised that he was still alive, given how bad the scan was. And was really like, there's nothing else we can do. So we started hospice care. We did it at home, so we didn't go to a facility.
Yeah.
We had, like, a nurse would come in once a week. But
did you guys decide you didn't want to go to a facility? You wanted him to be home? What made you guys decide that?
I mean, I think most people are more comfortable in their own home, and I wanted him to be comfortable, and you know, was already off work, so I'm like, I can be here with him. You know, nothing against facilities. I know that's a good option available for a lot of people, but it just wasn't. I know it wasn't what he wanted.
Okay. Did he tell you?
I don't remember if he did or not.
Okay.
I think he probably did, but I know him. Like,
yeah.
I know for sure that's not what he wanted. But he kind of just told me to handle everything. You know, I think it was probably, obviously he's dealing with his mortality and all of this stuff is happening. Plus it's difficult for him just physically, you know, just to have the energy to deal with all this stuff. And he just kind of didn't want to think about any of that, I think. But in any case, we started hospice end of April. So I've been off of work a couple months at this point, but I guess whenever we got to 3 months, you know, I was just happy to have more time with him and more opportunity for like family and other people that come by, because, you know, when we told his family, like I said, none of our family lives in Atlanta, and so they couldn't all come right away. And so I'm like, okay, is he still gonna be here by the time they get here? But he was, so we did get to spend some time with some people. And then, so FMLA finished, which is legally your company has to hold your position for 3 months. But when that finished, like, my company just decided to continue holding my position. They weren't obligated to, but my boss made sure. He's like, you know, take as much time as you want. I'll, you know, get your leave extended. You can come back when you're ready. So.
So when David was diagnosed, and then in March, you guys were told that, oh, he only has a couple of months. Or how long did he live after you were told?
7 months.
Wow.
Lost him at the beginning of October.
Wow. So he actually did live.
Yeah.
Was it? Wow.
We were all
surprised.
Yeah.
Was he surprised himself too?
I don't know. I never asked him, like, did you think you'd be dead now, honey?
Yeah. No, but do you think that the love that he's found in you, do you think that kind of also helped him live long or longer than expected?
I don't know.
You don't know?
It's one of those things I'm not questioning it. I just had to learn to take every day, you know, as it came.
So, I'd like for us to talk about you for a second. When all of this was happening right before you, he lived 7 months, or even after the 3rd month, how were you emotionally and mentally?
You know, I'd said that since he got diagnosed for our relationship, every single day I prayed for full and complete healing. But I think once he started hospice, I stopped praying that. I stopped hoping for that. I just, you know, wanted him to be as happy and comfortable as he could.
You're a very strong woman, Kayre. You're a very strong person. Living 7 months knowing that, you know, he could leave you at any time, but your love was still very, very consistent for him until his passing. And I think that was one of the things that held him. That was one of the things that gave him other days, gave him other months to it, because I'm sure if he had his chance, he would have wanted to spend more time with you. And I'm sure each time, from the way you talk about Dave, his intentionality and his consistency, I'm sure he was holding on, trying and fighting, because he also wanted to spend time with you. He didn't just want to leave you, and he could feel your love. And some way, somehow, I think he did know that you loved him, and that was what kept him going.
Yeah, I told him that every day. I mean, every other minute, I wish I loved him. And our relationship was always like that. I always told him I loved him every day, but I just, really wanted him to know that I was there. I was with him. Like,
Can I hold you?
I can't imagine how he felt, like how I would feel if I were the one in his position. How scared I would be, He never said that. I don't know if it was just easier for him to not talk about or whatever, but, he was just the kind of person he is. He would always be the one, like, we would leave an appointment and he'd be like, are you okay? Like, you're the one with the brain tumor,
Yeah. But he used to ask you if you're okay.
He's just always, that's how he was wired, He always cared about other people.
Yeah.
But, yeah, the difficult thing about, like, any cancer, any serious disease is obviously horrible, especially if it's terminal or, whatever, but the thing that's really hard about brain cancer is you're not just watching someone's body deteriorate, you're watching their brain deteriorate, and your brain controls your whole body and all these different functions and things, and it varies depending on where someone's tumor is, but like he is a very brilliant person and his just cognitive functions started to go, which was his biggest fear. Like he told me, like when they first found the tumor, because it was a source of pride for him, a source of identity. And he's like, am I going to become like a child? Am I not going to be able to think or reason or function? And I guess I just hope when he got to that point that he didn't have enough cognitive function to realize that he didn't, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I hope he wasn't in the place of being aware that he can't think the way he used to, but I don't know. That's not something I'll ever know. But anyway, I say all that to say he could still understand. Mm-hmm. Like he still knew who everyone was and what was going on around him, and he was still completely like aware and cognizant of what was happening. But a lot of people who have brain cancer or even just traumatic brain injuries get something called aphasia.
What's the name again?
Aphasia.
Aphasia.
Mm-hmm. And it can affect your language, and sometimes it affects being able to find the right word, or your speech, just being able to talk. But like you can still, it doesn't mean your thinking is different, but your ability to
express it
a lot of times, or process speech or whatever. And so with him, he could always understand me, but he, over time, lost the ability to speak. Like, nothing was wrong with his vocal cords, but his mind just wouldn't give him...
To put the words together.
Yeah. So when he stopped being able to talk, that was one of the hardest things for me, because my husband couldn't tell me that he loved me anymore. Yeah. And our whole relationship, he told me that every single day.
Yeah.
And especially being, insecure, like coming from that background, it was just that affirmation I got from him constantly every day, and I knew he still loved me, but it was just really difficult not being able to hear it. And I would tell him I loved him, and he would squeeze my hand and would say, "Do you love me?" And he would nod or give me a thumbs up or something, but he couldn't, like, even if I said the words, he couldn't find them.
Yeah.
And it was just, anyway,
But that was the last few months, so I guess that went on for a while. I just had to, I just had to do that work to remind myself, and I know that he's still the same person and he still loves me.
For how long was he not able to talk before he transitioned?
I would say probably sometime around June, July, maybe he started like talking a lot less. Maybe July, and then beginning of October was when he passed.
Okay, so you say maybe
months.
he wasn't really able to talk for like 2 months?
Yeah, and he could still talk, like he would still say yes or no, but he couldn't form a sentence.
Full sentence. Okay. Let's talk about finances a bit. When you were out of work, he was out of work. When, MFLA, you are not getting paid. How were you guys able to sustain yourselves financially?
FMLA itself doesn't pay you, it just allows you to be on leave. Now, a lot of people at the same time will take short or long-term disability, like if they have that coverage through their employer, and that's what they get paid through. Mm-hmm. I couldn't take that because I wasn't the one with the illness. Mm-hmm. So I did not get paid. I was on leave for like 8 months because I was on leave for the 7 months that Dave lived, and then, it was probably like a month before I went back to work after that. So I didn't get paid at all for 8 months. But he, luckily, he had a really great job before, and they had a really good long-term disability policy. And I didn't know this because I thought, so initially he was going to go back to work, and he had actually even filled out the paperwork, and then he had the stroke, and then he didn't go back. And so then he did some more recovery and whatever, and when he felt good enough to go back again, he was going to go back half-time, and that's what his doctor cleared him to do. And at that point, his company was just like, I guess half-time wasn't good enough for them, and they did keep him on for quite some time, like at least a year of him not being there. So they eventually let him go, and they just kind of said, well, don't come back. But his long-term disability policy, and I didn't realize this, wasn't tied to his employment. Like it lasts as long as, until he dies, basically. And so he was getting paid a percentage of his salary through long-term disability. And then the other thing was that he also, because of his illness, was able to file for Social Security disability insurance. And so he was getting a check each month from SSDI and from the long-term disability, the LTD, from his old company. So financially we were okay, because even though it was just a percentage of his salary, it was enough to cover the mortgage and everything we needed. And hospice was covered. There was no costs for hospice through Medicare. I don't remember all the details, but we were taken care of.
Let's talk about the day of Dave's passing, Dave's transition. Closer to that, did anything change? Did he change? Did he say something? Did he do something unusual? Did he do more of something?
Like, did I see it, that it was coming?
Yes. Did you see, or did he know that it was coming?
I don't know whether he knew, but he had still been, when he was on hospice care, he was still kind of, getting up, moving around, whatever, and then sometime in September, he transitioned to needing a hospital bed. So we got one moved in, because he was just, sleeping in a regular bed until then. And then they had to change his medication. And the new meds that they put him on to had to be he was dealing with a lot of like anxiety, and he had these tremors and all this stuff, and was just, he wasn't in pain, but he was extremely uncomfortable, and he wasn't getting any sleep. Like literally I was up all night with him. And so the new medication, for it to be strong enough to help him with that, it basically knocked him out, and he was sleeping most of the day. And when he was awake, his body was so tired he couldn't get up and like walk around anymore. So for the last month he was bedbound. And then maybe like the Saturday, I think he passed on a Monday. And the Saturday, he was the first day he literally slept all day. I mean, he did not. I tried to wake him up to give him his medicine and to eat something, and he wouldn't even wake up. He literally slept for 24 hours straight. And the hospice nurse had told me that, you know, usually when people are getting to the end, they'll stop eating and they'll stop drinking. And apparently people can last a week without eating. I didn't realize that. So he was already eating less, but when he didn't eat anything at all that day because he wasn't even awake, I'm like, okay, is this kind of coming to end? Like, if he's not eating or drinking anymore, he probably only have like a week. And then the next day on Sunday, luckily he was awake part of the day because a couple of his friends came over. Those last visitors we had. So he still slept most of the day, and he probably drank like half a bottle of Ensure or something, and like didn't eat anything else. And then the Monday morning he was gone, but he was having trouble breathing. He was breathing really, like he just sounded really strained, and like I checked his oxygen and it was super low. And we had a machine which he hadn't previously needed to be hooked up with, but we had it there in case. And so I put him on the oxygen, and it was still really low. And I, called the nurse, and she came over, and she just told me like, this is imminent. It's gonna be. He's like, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, but it's gonna be soon. And she took me to the next room to tell me that because she didn't want to sit in front of him. But like, I feel like if he didn't already feel that, he would have assumed, picked that up, but he wasn't. The last couple of days were really hard. Like the day he was sleeping, and even the next day when he was awake, he just was completely non-responsive. Like if I said his name or, squeeze his hand, like he wouldn't do anything. But I'm like, I think he can hear me, but, he was still there, but I don't know how there he was.
So prior to the few days, like the last 3 days before he transitioned, I'm assuming that, since he was bedbound, he couldn't, of course, walk. Or before he was bedbound, could he use the bathroom and stuff by himself, or he needed assistance with that?
He needed assistance, but I would still be able to help him.
To go? Oh.
Before he was bedbound.
See. Wow. So on the day that he transitioned, how did it happen? Do you feel like he needed you to give him the permission before he left?
I don't know. People talk about that a lot. Like, someone was waiting for someone to give them permission, or for this person to come, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And maybe I won't know until I'm in that situation, but I don't really know if he had control over that, or if that was just when his body said it's time, or, when God said he was ready. I don't really know. I definitely wanted him to know, like, when he was really having like a really rough time, and he was dealing with all this, like, the anxiety, and like the pain did start to get really bad, and they had to put him on some really powerful medication, which of course everything has the side effects, and you have to take something else to counter the side effects of that. And it was just getting to the point where I'm like, I know this is really a lot for him, and trying to take all these pills, which are hard to swallow, and then all of this, and I wanted him to know that I would be okay, that he, you know, of course his life was too short, but he lived a great life, and I just, at that point, like, I wanted him to be in peace, you know? Like, you never want someone to leave, but I know he wasn't having the full life he deserved at that point. Kind of felt like he was just surviving. And it was hard for him, it was hard for me, it was just, but, you know, I don't know if he, because also at this point he wasn't really able to talk, so, you know, I don't know if he was holding on for me, but and he couldn't tell me whether he was or not, but I definitely didn't want him to, you know. I just tried to somehow tell him that, you know, he could release whatever, you know, but I don't know. That was just the time.
What time of the day did it happen?
It was like 11 o'clock in the morning, but when I had woken up that day, so we had some caregivers who would come every evening, and they would stay with him overnight. Like, they would stay awake, you know, and sit next to the hospital bed, and, like, you know, if he needed something in the middle of the night, just so I could get some sleep. And because I wasn't getting any sleep, and I was just exhausted, just physically and mentally and emotionally, and so I slept in our bed that night, and I was even thinking before I went to bed, I'm like, maybe I should sleep in the hospital bed with him downstairs. And I hadn't initially, because he was having all that anxiety and the tremors and everything, and like constantly waking up, and I wasn't getting any sleep, and that's, you know, when we had people coming to help. But at this point he was, you know, sleeping most of the day, and like he still was aware of me. I'm like, you know, maybe I should stay here, but I didn't. So when I woke up the next morning, the aide, or the person there who was helping us, who stayed up with him, told me that he, you know, had been awake, but he was breathing really, you know, and I could hear him. He was struggling.